Eat human.
Les humains à leur meilleur.
C'est tu apogeo.
Pku ningen.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Brian Sanders, and I quit my job and have dedicated my life to the investigation of nutrition and lifelong health. I'm creating the feature-length documentary Food Lies, this podcast, and a health technology company here in Los Angeles with a doctor and 2 other partners. Today, I'm talking to Tara Couture, who is a certified nutritionist, homestead farmer, expert in nutrient-dense cooking and living, and maybe my new favorite person ever. She's raised her family for 25 years on the most amazing nutrient-dense foods you can imagine, using her nutrition background, teachings from Weston A. Price, raw milk from farmer friends, and mostly her own animals she raises. She butchers her own animals, churns her own butter, makes her own head cheese, etc., etc. She's the real deal. Check out what I'm talking about before you even listen to this episode on her amazing Instagram account, @slowdownfarmstead. That's @slowdownfarmstead. She's a wealth of information, and I genuinely enjoyed our talk. We get into vegan lies, the Canadian mafia-like police arresting people for selling food they produce by hand, crazy family members refusing to eat her food, and a lot more. Her husband is an ER doctor and deals with some of this insanity as well. Don't forget you can still pre-order the Food Lies film on Indiegogo to support its creation and this podcast. Thanks again for everyone's support so far, and please enjoy this great episode with Tara Couture. Let's just get this going. Tara, thank you so much for coming on. I found you on Instagram in a weird way. I think the force of the universe led us together because my friend told me to follow you. You were already following me. It's just great that this nutrient-dense pathway led us to each other.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So she has the greatest Instagram account I've ever seen, just to let everyone know. I found it and spent the next hour just sitting on my couch, going through every photo and wanting to be there and live this life and wishing this was how I grew up and how I could eat on a daily basis. And all my life now is trying to replicate this in the most LA city wannabe version possible. It's a far cry from what you do. So yeah, I wanted to talk to you today and get into all this good stuff about how you live and all that.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here. And I think, trying to do what you can in your LA way has just as much merit, if not more so, than what I'm doing. So I wouldn't depreciate your efforts too much, Brian.
Well, yeah, I'm trying to spread it out more out there. So tell us. So first of all, it's called @slowdownfarmstead.
Right. Yeah.
On Instagram. It's so great. So you're a homesteader. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, so I grew up on a farm in Manitoba. So I always knew I wanted to find my way back to a farm, but we spent most of our lives being posted from city to city as adults in the military. And then about 10 years ago, we bought our first farm. It was almost 200-acre farm, and we raised grass-fed beef and sold that and some other animal products. And then 3 years ago, we retired or semi-retired and bought the farm we're at now, hence the name Slow Down Farm, trying to slow things down. And we raise animals or we have organic vegetables and some organic fruit trees and nut trees. And we mainly raise that for ourselves and our family and a small number of customers. And then we also sell some live animals as we go.
That's so awesome. I love that. Just like a self-sustaining system where you just eat off your own land.
Yeah, it's an amazing place to be. We worked really hard to get here, and for most of my life, I wasn't anywhere near here. I relied on other farmers that were putting in the work to get us good food, so I feel very grateful to be in this spot now.
Yeah, that's awesome. And we had a long talk. I love having talks with people before I podcast with them or just in general. And we ended up talking for 2 hours and it was great. But you told me that everywhere you went, the first thing you do is find a farmer, right? You have to find, where am I going to source my food?
Everywhere we went. And my husband retired after 25 years in the military. I only served for 7 years, and then I went back to school and became a nutritionist. But that was 25 years of moving. So there was a lot of upheaval. And sometimes, it was usually every 2 years, but there was one time it was 8 months. I mean, it could be any amount of time. So yeah, the first thing I would do always is find my farmers because we had to eat. And we had a pretty meager income at that time. And we drove a pretty crappy car. And we lived in military housing, but we ate well. And I was always very committed to that and to the nutrition of my kids, the health of our family. So in order to do that, I had to find the farmers that were farming the way that I wanted to and were producing the type of food that I wanted to feed my children and us. And so it was a real education coming from like a place where, you could go to the grocery store and there's that convenience, but it comes at a pretty heavy cost too, not just monetary, but also the nutrient density of the food. And also, I just wanted, if I was going to be eating animals, I wanted to be responsible for the life, how those animals lived their lives. And also the relationships that I made with the farmers. I mean, my farmers ended up being some of my best friends. I would volunteer time and go work there whenever I could just to be on the land and to learn from them. And those times were some of the greatest gifts of my life. So yeah, we had to find our farmers every time we moved.
That's so cool. So it seems like it would be so much easier to just go to in America here on base, they have the cheapest grocery stores ever where you get, the military discount or tax free and all that. And you could have just bought whatever from there. But instead you tracked down farmers and drove long distances to go get the food that you wanted to eat.
Yeah, same here. Like it's kind of an artificial, like I've been to the PXs there, so I actually did some training in North Carolina, but I know what looks cheap though, it has a really heavy cost to it. Not only one of the things, the whole reason I have an Instagram account is I don't have anything coming out. I'm not, social media savvy. You're
not selling any book or Bible.
No, and I am a nutritionist, but I'm retired. I don't want to talk to anyone on a personal level about it anymore. I think I'm more interested in the big picture. And I just, I have 3 daughters. One's 25, almost 26. The other one's 22. And my youngest is turning 16 in a couple of months. And I just am at a place where I'd rather talk to people on a macro level than, individuals. And I just think that we've all been sort of sold this bill of goods, and it's just a lot of bullshit, this idea that the grocery store is convenient. And I think we've all been raised with habituated patterns that are comfortable, but there's a lot more ease in doing things differently. Not at first, for sure, but one of the things that I talk about a lot, and getting back to cost, like you asked about, was, if I go to the grocery store and I have a family of 5 and I want to feed them some good quality meat, even bad quality, even just like feedlot beef is expensive to buy individual cuts. But if I go on, I don't know if you guys have Kijiji in the States, like a Craigslist or whatever, and buy a used deep freeze for $50 or $100 and plunk that in my basement. And by the way, this is what I did when we moved. I had 2 deep freezers in our basement. And in the fall, when the farmer harvests their food, and that can be everything from root vegetables, buying buying, I don't know, 15, 20 chickens at a time and buying a whole side of beef or a whole animal. It seems like a lot because you're paying in one bulk amount, but what we used to do is set aside our money every month. And, as our food budget, even though we weren't actually spending it, we would stick it in an envelope. And then in the fall, we would have our cash in order to buy these really nourishing food products from our farmers. And same thing with, I used to buy raw milk and raw butter and stuff. And so same thing with that. That was part of my grocery budget, and I would buy it in bulk. And like I said, we sacrificed other things as well. We didn't drive a really great car, and we didn't have a big ass TV and all that other stuff. It was just the priority. And so it's doable. Like, it seems expensive because we're used to going somewhere and buying things individually, and our grocery bill $60 compared to whatever, a few thousand because you bought it all at once. It's just a mind shift in how you make that happen.
Well, it breaks down. I mean, obviously when you buy in bulk, you save a lot. How much did it break down to? It's like only a couple dollars a pound, right?
Oh, it's exactly it. Yeah, exactly. And not only that, but it's, a couple dollars a pound that it breaks down to, but it's the amount that you can stretch that food. So for example, even a side of beef, let's say, not even a whole animal. When we were selling that on our other farm before we lived here, we were selling that for $4.75 a pound hanging weight. And so you get not only that, all of that beef, you get all of those bones, not just, not just a few marrow bones, but all of the bones. You get all of the fat trim if you want it. So you can render that down for tallow to cook your food in, which is such a nourishing food. You get the organs. I mean, and you get to cut the way that you want to. If you're only 2 people and you want a 2-pound roast, that's what you get them cut into, and then when you figure that out, in a cost comparison to buying, let's say, the prime cuts of like a T-bone or a porterhouse or, ribeye, which everybody's crazy about right now. And then you look at that compared to the lesser cuts, like let's say a blade roast, and you even that out. I mean, economically, it's a savings, a huge savings, and you're getting this incredible meat. I mean, we're not even talking about the nutrient density of that meat or the welfare of that animal or how it affects your body when it goes into you. This is just dollars, so it's amazing difference.
It sounds like once you get used to it, it's not hard at all, right? It's just about what you're used to. I think you said that to me last time we talked, where it's just different. It's not harder. It's just different. Things are harder. It's harder maybe to go to a grocery store every week and buy, individual cuts of meat than to just do it once and then have it with you, right? It's just all relative.
It's so true. And I know not everyone is in a situation like mine, and we work to get into this situation. But even having said that, exactly what you just said is when we were in military housing and I had my deep freeze, it meant that I could go downstairs where it was cold and I would have some, squash and root vegetables that I had bought in bulk from a farmer. And I could open up my freezer and pull out a roast and stick it in a slow cooker for the next day's meal with some squash and some onions and have this really beautiful food that was in my basement. And it didn't require me to get in my car and go buy subpar, food that had been sitting there for however long and was of questionable. I didn't know where it came from. I didn't play a part in that food either by taking responsibility for, how it was raised or for even knowing where it came from and how the land was treated. And I mean, all of those things when you buy from a farmer or, from a farmer's market or from a food co-op where you get the story behind the food. It's a connection that maybe you can't actually be on the land, but you're still connected to that food, and we should all be connected to our food.
Yeah, it's really hard these days. I really believe in that, but it's hard for people to do it in the city environment. I'm jealous of you living out there, but we have modern life. So how do people do that just in a city? Just go to the farmer's market?
Yeah, well, I think the farmer's market for sure. I know most cities have multiple different types of CSAs that people can find out about and get involved with.
What's a CSA?
It's a community shared agriculture. So it's like a farm that's producing food and you give them so much money at the beginning of the season and then they take those money and use it as shares to buy their seeds and their, farming equipment and their time. And then every week in return, they deliver a big box of food to you. That's, usually organic, but definitely local. I mean, they're all different. You can get meat CSAs, you can get veggie CSAs. There's even dairy and egg CSAs. I know my one daughter, my 25-year-old daughter who lives out on the West Coast and is going to school full time. There's a farm that's about 500 kilometers north of her up in the mountains of British Columbia. And they come down once every 6 weeks. So she just contacts them and she puts her order in and they come down and go around to different church parking lots and she gets her order and pays for it and they'll put it in her little bachelor apartment freezer and she has good quality meat for the next 6 weeks. And it's way cheaper for her to be able to do that. She couldn't, to go to the health food store and buy meat like that would just be impossible. But she's a student. She's paying her own way through school, and she's paying her own apartment and everything else. And she's found a way to sort of make that happen. So I think there's different ways you can do it. I know some people will, when we were selling beef, we would sell a whole animal, but there would be 5 or 6 people that were dividing it up. And, none of them needed, maybe they didn't need that much, but they would all share it. So, you can go in as a buying group and do it that way too. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to do that with a friend of mine, and I am going to do that with some people soon. But I love that your daughter is, for one, continuing on with this really nutritious way of eating on her own, and two, that she's like a sketchy parking lot meeting people. It sounds like some illegal activities are going on in church parking lots, but it's so great that that's happening, and you can make it happen in just like a small apartment.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I don't think anything has to be all or nothing. I don't ever want to portray this picture, and I'm always a little bit wary of that too on Instagram, of showing things and then making people feel that it's so out of reach that they're just kind of defeated, like this is just not even possible here. And I didn't get to hear from zero, it was all little steps all along the way. And I had, very long time ago now, got involved with Weston A. Price. And then from there, things sort of evolved. And then I had removed grains from the Weston A. Price Foundation. And then just things sort of evolved over time. But our daughters were raised eating really great food, lots of animal fats, and they weren't raised on sugars or grains. And they have all continued on eating that way because, when they were teenagers and they would go to their friend's place and they would eat sort of typical, whatever they ate, Kentucky Fried Chicken or whatever it was, they felt like hell, and they would come home the next day and spend the day puking because they were so nauseous from it. They just couldn't deal with it. So a lot of times people say, well, if you raise your kids and you're too strict with them, they'll rebel. And I just don't. From experience, I think that's kind of bullshit because, I was raised really healthy. When I was a teenager, I went out and ate a bunch of crap, and I knew what it felt like to be sick in my body. I knew what my body was supposed to feel like, and I knew it wasn't supposed to feel like that. And I think that alone is what, to be able to grow up and be like, this is what a strong functioning body feels like. This is what a clear mind feels like. When you deviate from that, you realize something's wrong and you want to get back to that place. And, I obviously can't speak for all the teenagers of the world, but that's been my experience with my kids anyway.
Yeah, we're so desensitized to how this food's making us feel. We think it's normal.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
If you actually are eating the real food and then you start eating our wacky modern foods, it's like a shot to the system. Well, so tell us what you eat. Just describe some of these meals. These meals are fit for a king. I can't get over them. It's almost like it's fake. Someone invented the most perfect meal you could possibly eat. Weston A. Price is rolling over in his grave, just dreaming of your meals.
Oh, wow. Well, come here and I'll feed you, Brian.
I will.
Describe my meals. Well, we try to eat different types of proteins. We have a very heavy animal protein and fat and cartilage and sinewy bit diet. I don't like to say I really appreciate sort of this carnivore movement, and right now I'm only eating animal products, but I don't like to say it's a carnivore or keto diet at all because that's not what I'm after. I'm going after nutrient density. So I was diagnosed with Lyme disease 8 years ago, and it's been a pretty tough slog, but I'm in a really, really good place right now. And I feel super pumped and excited because I'm back in the gym and doing all these things that were a real challenge for me for a long time. And I've just really been focusing on animal fats, organ meat. I very strongly believe in nose to tail eating. I have a lot of really old French cookbooks that have all those.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
full animal.
Best. Yeah, exactly.
So the name of meal, there was like 8 different things on a plate.
Oh, well, one of the things I do is I make things like roulette and pate and different types of, I made head cheese, but someone told me a Spanish name for that. That was so much more attractive than head cheese because that just sounds hideous, but it's actually very delicious. But things like that I make in bulk. And then, so it's kind of cool. And I'll do like, I'll make some duck prosciutto or something like that I can do at a whole bunch at a time. Like I salt cure egg yolks. And then I have all that in the fridge. And then, I'll cook something up. Like today I had some beef liver from a steer that we butchered a couple months ago. And I cooked that up. And then we also had a couple slices of head cheese on the side. And then I had some dehydrated mushrooms that I put some rabbit pate. We raise meat rabbits as well. And in the rabbit pate, we just butchered a bunch of rabbits. And so I had put their livers, their kidneys, and their hearts all in there and made this delicious pate. And then I poured some duck fat on top of the pate. It helps to keep it longer, but it's also just crazy delicious. And then we had some goose confit that I had in the fridge. So it all sounds like super confusing and stuff, but it's
Well, it
not.
sounds like a $200 French meal from a fancy chef, but so what is even in head cheese?
So head cheese is, okay, so when we butcher a pig, you take the head and split it in half or quarters, doesn't matter. And so a lot of times now, like that'll get chopped up. Like if you were looking at an industrial pig, they would chop it up and maybe that would end up in your, I don't know, wieners or bologna or whatever, it disappears into these sort of mystery meats. But you brine it in salt water for 24 hours and then you cook it up for a few hours with, bay leaves or whatever spices you want. It's really not fancy. And then you take it out, you drain it, and you literally pick the fat and all of the meat off of that head, and it just falls apart. And there's an enormous amount of meat in pigs' cheeks and along their ears and up around. There's tons of muscle meat there. So you just take it, you chop it up really coarsely, and while you're doing that, you're boiling down the rest of that filtered water that you had cooked it in. You just filter it and you boil it down. And it is just, when you're done chopping up all the meat, you pour it in a little tureen and you pour that liquid on top, which is pure gelatin. It is just amazing, this liquid. I'll use it to cover up all that meat, and then you put it in the fridge, and then it just slices into these delicious little slices. It's wonderful. But you can then, what you end up with is this huge pot of pure gelatin that you can literally stand a knife in. And I take all of that and I pour it into jars. And like from one recipe of head cheese, I'll get maybe 20 liters of extra liquid, maybe 15, 20 liters that I put in the freezer. And then whenever I make bone broth, or if I want to make like a sauce and I want that extra schmuck to it, I'll put in this gelatin, which is also so healing for the body.
So healthy for your ligaments and
exactly.
Oh my God, people pay tons of money for some like powdered gelatin.
Powder.
Yeah,
and it's there. Like I bet you that a lot of people could get free pigs' heads. I mean, I have a friend who's a biodynamic farmer, and she raises pork exclusively, and none of her customers want her pig's heads. So she brings me these big bags of pig's ears all the time because you can cook them down and fry them up, and it's like eating crispy deliciousness. I don't even know how to describe how delicious pig's ears are. You just cut them into slices. But there's like, and these are all of these odd little bits are full of this nutrition that is so badly missing in our diets when all we eat is the muscle meat of animals.
Yeah, and it also feeds your gut biome too. I mean, you don't need fiber. I mean, you're eating an animal-based diet, but you're perfectly healthy, getting all the bits and pieces that feed those gut bacteria.
That's it. And it's absolutely amazing. It's like nature's figured it all out. We just have to get out of her way and let her do her thing.
It's so cool. I just pulled up the Instagram. It's raw sheep cheese, grass-fed beef summer sausage, organic beef tongue cooked in ghee, leftover organic pastured chicken soaked and baked in real raw and cultured buttermilk, halloumi fried in ghee. Halloumi's so good. I didn't even have a halloumi until I went to Australia. Home cured duck prosciutto.
Yeah.
Oh my, every single meal is like, well, I kind of try to do this too, is where if you just have stuff on hand and then you can just put it together into a meal.
That's it. And all that stuff, honestly, okay, duck prosciutto, right, sounds so fancy. Like, it sounds intimidating. You know what it is? You take duck breasts. Okay, we raise ducks, but who cares? You can buy a duck breast, right? You buy say 3 or 4 at a time. You pack them in salt overnight. That's it, 24 hours. And then that's it. You wipe them down and you hang them in cheesecloth in a cold place. Even a cool basement will work. For a week, you have duck prosciutto. Slice it like super thin. And it's like all these things, I just feel like we've been so ripped off, like the food producers and these food industries, they want us all to believe that we're inept, and all these things are so confusing and challenging, and don't even try it,
Yeah, like we have the answer, just grab our frozen dinner or our prepared foods, and it's going to save you so much time and money. And it's it's a nightmare. And I love that too, that the long-term cost is so huge with your health.
Exactly. And one of the things I always say too is when I put a plate like that up, or if somebody asks me things, I always say, like, this is fast food that took years. It's years in the making, but it's fast food, because literally, like, a plate like that, that's me getting in after a morning of chores or doing something and literally having 10 or 15 minutes to put it together. But I've done all the other stuff before when I did have more time, that's, I think, I don't know, I kind of got ranty the other day on Instagram because I was pissed off because someone on a podcast was saying that they were doing an ad and saying that bone broth.
Trying to sell some bone broth product.
Exactly. Saying it was such a hassle. And you know what? There's a place for bone broth products. That's not my point. My point is just that don't tell people things are hard or that they're a hassle when we're trying to promote the health of people. Like, you have to, it's
the
not
wrong
hard.
Message.
Yeah, it's the wrong message.
I even made bone broth too. I'm just starting to get into this stuff, and it's easy. I just had a slow cooker. I just threw them in.
It's so easy. Yeah. What can be easier than that?
I don't know. Yeah, it's great. I mean, you could get fancier and try to add, some onions and whatnot and make it fancy. But yeah, you just throw it in, and then I put it in jars and I had it in the freezer. And yeah, I just finished one off. I just got out of the freezer and finished it today.
Yeah, it's awesome. That's it. And that's all there is to it.
Yeah. So I want to know more about, for one, I don't understand how you have a 26-year-old daughter when you look like you're 26. Like, you've been eating this way for a long time. That must be part of it. And you've been eating this way around since she was born?
Yeah, so she was born, when she was born, actually, they do a pretty regular test in the hospital for, it's called the Pku test, and hers came back abnormal, even though she was a 9-pound baby and seemingly in perfect health. And so for the next year, we were going to the children's hospital, and there were specialists that were following her, and they diagnosed her with this very rare condition called OTC. And they told us that in boys it was fatal, and in girls they would be blind and likely mentally retarded as well. And so I was young. There was no internet. I mean, I guess there was, but it was not useful. And I drove a couple hours into a city to go find these bookstores to try and find answers. And so, I at the time, in this disease, they are lacking an amino acid that breaks down ammonia in the body. And so I thought, and ammonia is a byproduct of protein metabolism, of course. So I thought, it only makes sense that I am careful about eating protein because I was breastfeeding her at the time. And so I decided that I was going to become a vegetarian when I was, so she was probably about 6 months old at that time. Thank God it wasn't a lot earlier than that. But I became a vegetarian, and then fast forward, 6, 7 months, and then they decided that no, she didn't have this after all. It was a misdiagnosis, and her blood levels had returned to normal. And so I don't know whatever happened there, but I had become a vegetarian. I was doing it the right way. I was, combining grains and beans and doing all that thing. And by about the second year into that, or the third year, I was just emaciated. I'm tall. I'm almost 5'9", and I was down to about 110 pounds, and that was eating a lot. I was just nutritionally, I was just depleted, and it just didn't work for me anyways. And but that did get me started on my journey towards nutrition and health and understanding things. And I ended up going to an old German doctor near the base that we were living at. And I remember him just looking at me and saying, I don't even need to ask you anything. You just need to start eating eggs and sourdough bread and bacon and meat. And I thought he was completely nuts. But I eventually listened to him. And so that's where everything started. And so from there, I was careful to feed the kids organic, which was really easy to get where we were living at the time because I actually knew some farmers. And so I was buying from my friends. And yeah, and then things just sort of moved on from there. So they were all raised drinking raw milk and raw cream and lots of animal fats. They're all beautiful and lean. And my youngest daughter
never had antibiotics, right?
Never had antibiotics, no. And never, they've never, actually, they don't have doctors, actually. So that's pretty bad, but I'm a little embarrassed to say that.
No,
but
they
don't.
Why would you need a doctor if you had, it sounds, they just had perfect health their whole life? I mean, I guess we can't say perfect, but yeah, tell me more.
Well, no, like our middle daughter she got MRSA from school, that staph virus. Yeah, the MRSA virus. So she got these like terrible sores on her knees and her wrists. And we were trying to deal with that. Oh, that was months and months we were trying to deal with that. And I was really just giving her herbs. And then we were working with a homeopath and trying not to... And actually what ended up actually fixing that, and this, I am definitely not telling people to do this at all, but what ended up curing that was some raw organic honey we got from a friend that was a beekeeper, and we were packing the honey onto these sores, and within a couple of weeks, everything was gone, which was crazy. But anyway, I don't know.
Well, I know honey is sort of an antibacterial.
Yeah, for sure. It's very powerful. Yeah. But they have good health,
like no cavities.
No, they do. Like my oldest daughter, I think she has 3
She's the
fillings.
one that started.
She's the one that started it. And then my second daughter has no cavities, and my youngest daughter doesn't have any cavities either. Yeah. Yeah,
and I know your youngest plays on the boys hockey team.
She's a force, that girl. She's a A+ student. She plays on the boys hockey team, and she is in one of her classes they have at the school that she goes to, because we're in a rural area. They actually don't teach anything during hunting week, if you can believe it, because there's nobody there, because the boys are all out hunting and the girls are all out hunting and the teachers are sitting there. But they do a power fit class where they do weightlifting, and she just came home a couple days ago and told me that she's squatting 225 pounds, which puts me to shame. But so she is so strong, and she was 10 pounds, 6 ounces when she was born. Like she came out fighting weight, a little turkey.
That's like Weston A. Price right there. If you eat that diet, you have the strong, healthy baby. You
do. And you know what? Even more importantly, I think, is just their temperaments. Like we've all been places where kids are bouncing off the walls, and it's hard to be around kids like that. I can't imagine raising them. Like it would just be exhausting. They're already exhausting little creatures, but like add like hyperactivity and stuff. And all my kids are steady. Like they're just steady people. We've never had issues with them being out of control or, trust me, they were teenagers. They did wild things like every teen. I'm not saying they were angels, but they just temperamentally, like they're all just like calm and responsible and chilled out people. They're not, I don't know, like my husband works in a hospital, and he comes home and tells me stories of like so many teenagers that are going into these emergency room now and with mental health issues. And it's just heartbreaking because there's like this lack of resiliency or this maybe even confidence, but just this general melancholy and depression that seems to have permeated young people. And it's heartbreaking, really.
Well, I think it all starts with proper nutrition. I mean, you're kind of saying that in so many words, that if you're getting the brain full of fats that it needs, then it works better. And when you do the opposite, and you see, especially in the younger kids that are just wild and throwing tantrums and hyperactive and all over the place, it's obvious they're getting no real nutrition, and they're getting a bunch of carbs and sugar and processed foods, and their mind is just not developing correctly, and their energy levels is all over the place, and it's a nightmare.
Oh, exactly. I mean, I feel like pure hell when I eat like that. How can you expect a little kid, who already has impulse control, to eat these kinds of non-foods and then plunk them down into a grade 1 class and tell them to sit still? Like, it's not even doable. It's just heartbreaking where we've gone with our food, and we don't associate it with these behavioral problems,
Exactly.
which is just madness.
People who are new to this or listening might think that we're the crazy ones to suggest that it's based on your food, when it is. There's no doubt in my mind that it's based on this food. Not all of it. Obviously, not everything in the world is based on the food, but the general problems in brain, mental health, or behavior, or development, so many things, it has a major component. I'll just put it that way.
I totally agree. And you know what? I'm so used to people thinking I'm crazy. It doesn't even faze me anymore. I'm just like, I'm like knocking on, going to be 50 in a couple of years. And I don't know if something happens by that point. Maybe it's just, having raised 3 kids in a system that, like our older daughter, she was a competitive rower, and we would drive out somewhere for a weekend to a regatta, and I'd have a cooler full of food and be feeding her, like these real foods. She'd be like walking around eating, like hunks of meat dipped in like stuff, and her friends would have like Gatorade and power bars, and it's the same. It's been the same way for all my kids. We go to hockey tournaments, and for breakfast, everybody's in the hotel, eating whatever buns and cereal with skim milk, and then they're crashing from their sugar an hour and a half later. So the parents got to give them some more sugar, and then they go on the ice and they've got Gatorade for the whole hour, pumping them full of sugar, and then they come off the ice, and some of the parents will bring bags with chocolate bars to get their sugar back up. So it's just like, as soon as that blood sugar starts coming down, they're pumping them back full with the sugar. And it's just so backwards.
Do you bring your own cooler? Is that what you said?
We do bring coolers. Yeah. So we'll bring, I'll cook up all our meat and whatever. And by the way, like if you're cooking up hamburgers, you can cook up 20 hamburgers and put cooked meat in the freezer. That's, totally fine. And so that's what I will always do. I make a lot of food at once so that I can keep food for later. And then, we just bring, wherever we go, we bring our food. I had to go into Ottawa earlier today, and I brought my big bag of food with me when I had to go in, because I don't want to be stuck having to rely on stuff like that. My 16-year-old daughter's never had fast food, and she jokes that that's going to be her claim to fame on her tombstone. They're going to write the kid never went to McDonald's.
That's so awesome.
Because she's never had it. And she tells her friends, and they just think it's the most hilarious thing. Like, that she's so deprived that she never got to go to a fast food place. But I'm all right with that.
I love that. That's so funny that they think she's deprived when I haven't tasted it, but I would know this is the opposite of deprivation. This is the most decadent, delicious foods that seriously you'd pay $200 for a French chef to make for you.
But it's all just simple food. And I think that's the big thing too, is just, it's the quality of the ingredients, right? It's like, you can have a head of lettuce, but you can have a head of lettuce. Like, it just, where did it come from, and what was the soil like that it was grown in? What type of nutrients are in it? And I think that if you have really good ingredients, and you really don't have to do much, to make them palatable. You just cook them, and maybe a little bit of fat, maybe a little bit of salt, and there's your meal.
So you rely on the quality of the food instead of dressing it up with a bunch of sugar dressings and spices and whatnot. Yeah.
Exactly.
And then also, just to make sure everyone's clear, you're not caught up in this carnivore movement, just eating like just burger patties and stuff like that. You've been doing this for 25 years. and have no problem with vegetables, right?
No.
Are you just temporarily
no.
not doing it? I mean, yeah, you're eating
Exactly.
fermented. Yeah, you're eating making your own sauerkraut, olives. I've seen avocado. I've seen.
And just, that's my plate. Like, you're not seeing my daughter's plate most of the time. Sometimes I'll put I'll compare like the plates, but we have a gorgeous organic vegetable garden, and we have like fruit trees. And the big thing that I'm really been doing the last few years that has made a really big difference for me is more seasonal eating. And so, at this time of year, you'd have, you're not having salads, like this time of year. But for me, exactly what you're saying is right now, I'm just using animal products because that's my neutral state. I have no inflammation in my body when I eat this way. I feel fantastic. I have no gut issues when I eat this way. And I'm using that as sort of like a blank slate to then start adding back vegetables seasonally to see what it is. Because I was getting like some digestive issues and stuff. When I was first diagnosed with Lyme disease, I was put on a super high dose of antibiotics for 8 months, and it completely destroyed me. And I think I'm still working my way back from that place. But yeah, I'm huge into fermenting vegetables. I actually was teaching classes on how to do it in our little farm community a couple years ago, just to some older ladies that live around here. And it was pretty cool. But so I still do. And I actually mail fermented veggies out to my kids, and we eat seasonal vegetables as well. But for right now, the way that I'm eating with removing all vegetables, that's not my life plan. That's, I think vegetables are a part of a diet. I don't think they're a massive part of the diet. For me, I feel best when I rely more on animal products and lots of good fats and all the other bits of the animals that I mentioned before. And then using vegetables more as sort of a tasty side to that.
It's good. Yeah. They have their place. It's a good garnish, and they provide some good other types of nutrients and different types of things. But the nutrient density, the good stuff is all the animal foods, especially nose to tail.
Absolutely.
So tell me more about the area you live in and the farm and Canada in general. And
yeah, well, we live in Eastern Ontario. So I can drive about an hour and a half from here, and I'm in New York State, upper New York State. And we're surrounded by forest where I live. We live on a part of Canada called the Canadian Shield. So it's very rocky. The soils are pretty thin because they're all on this base of these massive granite outcroppings. We're surrounded by bear and deer and also apparently cougars now, but all sorts of wild beasties. And this is like one of the things that I think gets missed a little bit is that, this farm, and I would say most farms, especially in my area, are not conducive to growing like huge amounts of grain. I can't grow 100 acres of grain where I live, but what I can raise are animals, and animals that do really, really well in this forested area. So our cow herd, we do rotational grazing in the warmer months and spring, summer, and fall. And they go out in the forest. We practice what's called silvopasture. So they're out in the forest, and our forests are all disrupted with pastures. So they have access to pasture. And then they're also in the trees, and they eat the strangest things. They, sometimes I just follow them and look at what they're eating and the diversity of their diets and these wild herbs and flowers and leaves that they just love off of one shrub but won't touch off the other shrub. And they know. It just brings me such joy, to see these animals, which are intelligent and majestic and stubborn as hell. Cows are just, but they're not dumb, and they're not, we like to say these things because it makes us feel better about like eating them. But I think we can feel better about eating them by making sure that when they did have a life, it was a good one, But anyway, so that's the types of farms around here. I mean, it's quite a catch to have a farm where you could actually grow even 100 acres of grain. So this idea that somehow animals destroy the earth and grain or vegetarian diets will save the earth is just so nonsensical. I mean, anyone that works on the land could explain to you in one sentence why that can't happen. But I think because people are so disconnected from the land, from what farming practices, that they just don't even realize that that's just such a fallacy.
My blood is boiling right now. I'm just thinking about these vegans sitting in Santa Monica at the Whole Foods drinking some soy latte, thinking that they know about the environment, that they know how to fix everything, and that we just need to be eating grains. And if we didn't feed all these grains to these cows, or we could feed the world, they have no idea what they're talking about. What if they spent like one night at your farm and realized that all this forest land that cannot be used for anything else, the soil is not even deep enough, it's rocky, you can't grow stuff. You can grow animals that can graze on all these different little herbs and stuff that grow naturally, and they're very happy and they live a great life, and then it comes to an end and they feed people. And It's a perfect process, and it's the only way the world works. My head is spinning right now. Like, what?
It's infuriating, and it actually just makes me sad, to be honest, because I just feel like it's just such a testament to how lost our society has become, where we think that exactly what you're saying, people will sit down with their skinny, no-fit, fat, whip, whatever, and talk about such things, and as if there's some authority or knowledge in what they're saying. And, I can drive down the road and talk to the dairy farmer down the road, and he has, he's humble and kind and knows everything there is to know about his land, and he cares about his animals, and his family's been here for 200 years, but he doesn't have a voice in our society. That's not the way it works. It's the loudest drum thumpers that get all the attention, and it's really too bad, because it's not the truth, but because they're so loud, it seems like it's a majority.
It seems like, and they make these bogus movies, and what the hell. Even Bill Gates, you have these giant people like Bill Gates thinking that he knows how to save the planet. He's some nerd who started a computer company. Like, what does he know about farming? Like,
exactly.
Like, it's so irritating, and then everyone just believes them, and the big decisions are being made by these big rich people, and I mean, they're just misled too. They have all the powers, they have all the money, but they think they're doing the right thing, I'm guessing. And there's no way he's, trying to spend tens of millions of dollars and do the wrong thing. He believes it, but it's just so misguided, and lab-grown meats, and it's nonsensical.
Yeah, it is. It's disheartening. But that's why I think that none of this change is going to come from up top. Like, I don't think we should wait for the grocery stores to get in this type of meat, or I don't think we should wait that's why I think everything has to come from a groundswell. That's why even these little steps of just joining a CSA or meeting a farmer, or whatever it is, like all those things make a difference, and they're felt. They feel that. And unfortunately we live in a society where it's just the dollar that counts, and if you're voting with your dollar to do something different, that's when they pay attention.
So what else? What animals do you have on your property?
So we have dairy cows, and we have some beef cattle, and we have ducks and geese. We have meat rabbits, and we were raising a heritage breed of pigs, but we stopped doing that 2 years ago to get a break, but we're going to get some more this spring. We're going to start doing that again. And then that will be it for this year, I think. Yeah.
And you make your own butter?
I do make my own beautiful, beautiful butter, and that's compliments to my Guernsey and my Jersey cows, who are the most generous, benevolent cows you ever did meet, and they give me the most beautiful butter. I did a post where I compared supposed grass-fed butter from a store with my grass-fed butter. Did you see that one?
I think so. It's like yellow and
the store-bought, I'm not going to name the brand, but everyone knows what brand it is, supposed grass-fed butter. Yeah, and I mean, just, okay, I know I can't get everyone a bite of it, but you can see it. But when you could eat it too, it's just so deeply nourishing to eat food like that, and just hold it in your mouth, and to be able to, I don't know, I don't want to sound too woo-woo, but it just resonates with your body. We're humans, but we're animals, and we have instincts that I think are dormant. And when you eat food like that, it's just your body is like, this is right. This is just right.
That's what vegans say when they finally realize that they were wrong and they go back to animal foods, is they feel it's just right. They'll eat the cream or cream cheese or the egg, and they're just like, this is it. This is what I needed. And like you said about the cows know what to eat. And there's even studies about that. You can give them the same type of food, like 2 buckets, and they try to mask it as best they can to not know the difference. And the animals always know which one has more nutrition in it, or, whatever the control, and the other food would be, if they always choose the correct nutritious one. So
yeah, it's interesting. Like over the winter, typically they say the animals, they build up parasites over the winter. Their nutrition goes down, so there's not as much fresh stuff. Their immunity will go down, and then they can get parasites just like humans do. But it's really interesting because ever since we've had cattle, I sometimes will just go out there for a couple hours and just observe them. And the first year that we had them along a tree line where there's tons of white cedar trees, and they would not touch that white cedar. They can't stand the taste of it. It's too strong. They just wouldn't touch it. But all of a sudden the spring came and they could not get enough of the white cedar, so much so that I was going out into the woods and cutting down boughs of white cedar and bringing it to them, and they would just be fighting each other to get at it. I mean, it got ridiculous, the amount of white cedar that I was bringing them, and they ate it and ate it and ate it for about 2 weeks straight, and then they did not want to touch it again. And so I have books on herbalism and stuff, and I was looking at the anti-parasitical effects of white cedar, and it was astounding. And so every year now, I do the same thing. And the spring comes, I'll start bringing them big boughs of white cedar. They also like white pine needles, which is strange, but they'll just devour it for, 10 days, 2 weeks, and then that's it. I could bring it and they'll just poop on it. They don't want to see it again until next year. So it's just amazing, you're right. Exactly what you're saying is they just know what they need. And it's such an honor and a privilege of my life to be able to work with them and to observe that and to be a part of that.
Yeah. And vegans have those instincts. That's why they make their plant-based burgers and dogs and all that. They know, they have the instincts, and they smell bacon, they want it, but
they just gotta pretend.
They know,
yeah.
But they just,
but their body knows vegans. Too.
Enough about vegans. All right.
Yeah.
I wanted to know about how the politics work, or I talked to people about some of these farmers that are trying to do this type of thing in America, and they can't because the government gets in the way. If you don't go by the system, you don't use their subsidies and do the corn, wheat, and soy, then you can't get insurance. Right, for the crop insurance. And if you can't get crop insurance, you can't get a loan to buy your seeds and all this stuff. So people can't even do, say, rotational grazing, like you mentioned, or other ways of doing things because they can't even get insurance. So is that what goes on up there? I know there's all these different rules and regulations and weird stuff going on.
Yeah, well, it's subsidies that play a big part in farming. And the bigger your farm, the better your subsidy, because the more you have to risk. But it's the same thing here. I think our models are a little bit different, but there's a lot for smaller farmers and farmers that are doing things outside of the model of farming that they want you to do. So like big farmers sort of on the prairies that are exporting their grain to China. Though we're, compared to them, what I'm doing or what, my neighbor farmer's doing down the road or whatever, there's nothing. There's no, if something happens here to us, then, that's it, that we lose it. And that's all there is to it. You can, we have a different milk system here than you guys do. We have a quota system. So I'm not legally allowed to ever sell any milk, whether it was pasteurized or not. I could never sell milk. You have to have quota, which is something that you buy for tens of thousands of dollars in order to milk so much milk a year. So that's completely out of reach for farmers unless you are able to get a loan to buy that quota. And then that's managed by something we call supply management, which I believe your president has a big problem with, according to the news. But anyway, and it's the same thing, like that we here in Ontario, we have the Turkey turkey farmers of Ontario. And a couple of years ago, they were lobbying the government to make it illegal for small turkey producers to allow their turkeys to go outside because they said it was spreading disease. And that's because organic turkey, and we raise turkeys here too, cuts into their profit margin of their industrial, thousands of turkeys running around inside of their turkey houses. And they didn't like that. So they tried to get and I can only raise so many hundred meat chickens if that's what I want to do, because you have to get special licensing and permits and everything else to raise more than they want you to raise. And it's the same, even eggs. Like if I go to the farmer's market with my vegetables, that's okay. But if I had 10 dozen eggs to sell, I can't bring them to the farmer's market. I would have to say to the people, sorry, you'll have to come to my farm an hour away from the city and buy eggs from me there. I can't legally sell them to you here.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Didn't you describe it as a mafia?
It's like a mafia, right? Like when I used to be buying food for our family and I would buy raw milk, I honestly thought if I ever get busted buying raw milk, it's going to be like a more serious charge than doing a Coke deal, like seriously. Wow. I would be in these church parking lots and my farmer would be there and a bunch of cars would pull up and we would all be hush hush and didn't want the jars to clang together because if somebody saw us, they'd see it was raw milk, and it was just nuts. And actually there was one of the farmers who was a good friend of mine did get busted and ended up going to court and charged. And I mean, it happens all the time, but yeah, they raided his house and they had cameras on his house, and it's really unsettling to see that, but that's what happens. So if and we do milk our cows and we're allowed to milk them for our consumption, but if you came here and I gave you a glass of milk, that would be illegal, even if you said, yes, I would like that glass of milk.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa.
And it's the same thing with meat, right? Like, here, one of my biggest convictions is that we butcher our own meat. And that's because I don't want to load up my cattle into a trailer, because I have done this and we did do this, and drive them out to the abattoir, which is a small abattoir and they take great care. But I remember doing that once with this Highland heifer cow that I had. She was a heifer. So she was 2-year-old Highland. And she was beautiful, beautiful animal, and just very calm, nice nature to her. And we were selling beef at the time. I brought her to this abattoir, very small abattoir. They didn't rush the cows. They didn't smack them on the butts and yell at them to make them move faster. They took their time with her. And I used to stay all the time because I wanted to be there when they killed them. And I would go at 5 a.m. because I wanted her to be the first one to be butchered, because they were organic, and also because I didn't want her to see all the other anyways. And so I remember this one time specifically, and I brought her in and she came in through the head gate, and they have like a bolt that they put right to their head. And so it's instantaneous, but it was the second when she walked from where they were holding her into the room where they butcher them. And it just, I saw her walk through the gate, and it smelled very strongly of Javex in there, and everything was stainless steel and white and just kind of like a laboratory almost. It was so immaculately clean, which is great. But she walked in and her eyes just sort of bugged out, and it just looked so fucked up to me. Like, sorry for the language, but just this beautiful animal that, we raised from when she was a calf, and she'd always only known her farm and her herd and her grasses and her pasture and her trees. And here she was in the most foreign, it's just so strange. And so no matter, it was really unnatural. And I just thought, compare that to when we do it ourselves. And I do not like shooting our animals. Trust me, I'm not a hard-hearted person. That's why I do everything I do, because I really care for them. But compare that to, these animals being out on pasture. They're eating grass like they always eat grass. It's the same pasture they were born on. They're under the sun and the blue sky, and from a distance we shoot them in the head and they just fall down and they are dead, and it's over. And it sounds maybe harsh to people that have never done it, because we're so afraid of death in our culture, but I feel so strongly about this that I really want to spend the next part of my life working to get mobile slaughter more accepted. It's very unaccepted in Canada. They don't like it. It's practiced widely in Australia and New Zealand. I think maybe parts of the US allow it too. But it's so much more humane. And, and I think it's the way that things need to evolve to be done more ethically. That's what we do. And because we do that, I can't sell that meat. And again, Brian, if you came over here and I gave you a steak, I could be in big trouble. So, so it's okay to maybe break rules sometimes when it's morally imperative.
Yeah, well, for one, I did want to come film with you for the second movie, so we might have to not get that on film.
Yeah.
And, not tell anyone about this. But this is my dream. I want to come there and just eat everything and just be a part of this. Also, you told me about this humane way of
like mobile slaughter. Yeah,
mobile slaughter. So I watched the little 7-minute documentary on Vimeo. It's called I Kill. If anyone wants to look it up, I'll link to it in the show notes. But it was really compelling. It was about a guy, Australian guy who his job was to go around and kill these animals with a gun, and he just shoots them in the head. They're just minding their own business. They're happy. And then the next second, they're gone. It happens so ethically and peacefully, and the other animals around it didn't even know what happened, and they're totally fine as well.
Exactly. And I was really blessed in my life to have a mentor that had a 7,000-acre tallgrass prairie farm, and he was a lifelong cattleman. His father was a lifelong cattleman, and he was one of my best friends, and he passed away. And the first time I was ever involved with killing an animal was with him, and he had bison that roamed these 7,000 acres. So they were like a wild bison that we had to drive for an hour and a half through these fields looking for his bison the first time we went to harvest an animal. And so we found them, and there was a bison there, and I was petrified. I actually thought, oh my God, I'm gonna have to, like, what am I gonna do? Why am I here? I can't be part of this. This is too much. My heart was pounding. I'd never been around death before, and it just seemed so violent. And he shot that bison, and we brought it back, and we skinned it, and we butchered it. And then after that, it was a lot of animals that I had butchered with him and harvested and then brought back to the meat shed, and we hung them up. And then 3 weeks later, we would cut them all up. But the one thing that truly, like, one of the greatest gifts of my life, and it sounds maybe a little bit morbid, but I think if it sounds morbid, it's because people haven't been around death. And the reason I say is that when I was a little kid, I was always terrified of death. Like, if my mom went somewhere, I was sure she was going to die, and that was going to be it. I don't know why I was neurotic about death, but I was. And so it had always been this thing for me. But having now, I have this relationship with my animals. Some of them are 4 years old by the time we butcher them. We butchered last year a 16-year-old cow. She was just lovely. And still just had a calf the year before, like just a wonderful animal. And you develop a relationship with them, and you're supposed to develop a relationship with them. Yes, you name them. Yes, you learn about them and their quirks and everything else. But that's the whole point of life. Like, you develop relationships with everybody. It's not like I think, oh, my husband's going to die one day, so I'm not going to have a relationship with him, or I don't want to know about this person because they're going to die one day. It doesn't save you from anything, like the pain's going to be there. It doesn't matter, but you get to enjoy all the good stuff in the interim. And that's just really how I approach raising our animals. And then when it is time for them to die, I find it very hard. And I also find it's my responsibility, and hard doesn't mean shit if it means that I'm just copying out and giving it to somebody else. So I'm going to do it, and I'm not going to like it, and I'm going to do it because it's the right thing to do. So that's what we do. We butcher them, or we make sure that they have a humane death. And when they die, we say a little thank you. And we see them off. We put our hands on them and talk to them while they're leaving. And I'm telling you, and anyone that's listening, they leave. You can feel it. You can feel that there is something spiritual happening there. I'm not a religious person at all, but there is something spiritual happening there. And it's through being involved with that. And then that mentor of mine, that cattleman that I mentioned earlier, when he died, he was there and then he wasn't there. And it was, it's a really powerful thing to be a part of that. And it's not something that I think we should be scared of. I think a lot of us are scared and we don't want to talk about death. But I think that gives more power to these, confinement operations and to these horrors that are happening in these big animal production facilities. I'm not even going to call them farms. And, it lets them get away with things. And I think we need to bring these things out into the light and say, no, we are going to look at this, even if it hurts us, and we're going to shine a light on it and make sure that things are done the right way.
Yeah, I think so. And the same thing back to vegans, I guess, one more time, is they don't understand the circle of life and that for something to live, something must die. It's just part of life. And I think we talked about it last time, is that we're trying to rewrite the laws of nature here, that these people, I don't know what this new way of thinking and this new, everything revolves around me, and I, and identity politics. And I'm hurt by this and you made me feel this way. It's the wrong way to go. And it's manifesting in all areas in this political environment, but also in our food environment or how we eat or grow animals. It's all we know best now. And, this animals shouldn't have to die because I'm so special and I know everything and I said so.
It's so true. We think we can rewrite the laws of nature, and we're just so full of ourselves. It's ridiculous. And I guess that comes from being disconnected too. So if you want to stop eating beef, then stop eating beef. All the cows will disappear. There's no cow in nature. If I open up my fence, I don't know how long my cows are going to be out there with the wolves. It's not going to be that long or whatever. It is what it is. And I think I don't know. My opinion anyway is that I think that comes from our own personal problems with death. We don't want to be a part of that cycle where we're going to die too. So everyone lives as if they're never going to die. We live these subpar lives, spending our time in front of a TV as if we have all the time in the world. And no one wants to talk about the fact that they're going to die too. We're part of this system too. And the animal's going to die. So let's make sure it's a good death. And we're going to die. So let's make sure we really live. I don't know. That's how I feel about it.
I love it. I love it. And how does this work with the rest of your family? I think last time you were talking about your...
I think you're talking about when I had a couple family members here, and who is type 2 diabetic.
Not a slim woman.
Not a slim woman.
Mm-hmm.
And I had made this beautiful lunch. I had made a soup with broth and cream and just this beautiful lunch and all stuff from our farm. And she went out in the car in her cooler and came back with a diet yogurt, a NutraSweet something yogurt. Yeah. And then a can of diet 7-Up. And what else did she have? A granola bar, I think. And pushed the food away and sat there and ate her stuff.
Oh my God. This is hurting my soul. This is hurting
my soul.
Oh my God.
I was just aghast. I mean, I can't even imagine going to someone's house that was even giving me gross food. I would somehow choke it down. I'd feel so obligated. But that was that. So
that is so crazy. That is so weird. And you even try to talk to her, or just no?
They just think I'm weird. I think they just, I don't know. I think there's no point in really saying anything because, you see what they eat and it's just such a far cry and they know how we eat and they just I have family members that are the same and I just You
Don't
learn
they
to just
see it?
Sorry.
But do they see, like, they ate this way, so they don't connect? They ate this way and got obese and diabetic, and then you ate a certain way and look like you're 30. And and have strong, everyone in your family looks amazing and fit and strong.
I don't know what that is. I don't know.
They're just like, oh, it's just genetics. Oh yeah, they're just lucky.
Except we share them, yeah.
Yeah, except we share them, exactly. I love how people they'll try to say, oh, it's just genetics, you know. Oh yeah, this person's 500 pounds because just genetics.
Well, I think my dad is obese, and he had heart surgery, I think last year, the year before last, and now I've recently heard that he's having heart problems again that they're trying to get a hold of, and he's a big, big man. And, you know, so genetics, yeah, okay. Well, if it's genetics, then I better start, you know, I think genetics play the smallest part in things. It's your environment and what you do to nurture your health, I think, is infinitely more important than genetics. I don't buy it, the whole genetic thing.
Yeah. Well, doesn't your husband, so your husband's a doctor, does he see this kind of thing as well?
Oh my goodness, yes. He's an emergency room physician, actually. And the reason he does that is because he just can't stand general practice. And he
doesn't want to be part of the system and just pump out meds and all that.
No, exactly. And actually, you know, like I told you earlier, like our kids don't even have doctors. So I don't have much faith in sort of Western medicine and this idea of chronic disease management. You know, it leaves me cold. It's just that's not how I think health should be approached. And so I've always, I don't know, I maybe had a bit of a chip on my shoulder towards Western medicine. And, you know, you get a group of people together and they love talking about how the doctor just wanted to prescribe them this or that or this or that. But now, you know, I see things a little bit differently. And that's, you know, because he goes to work and he just tells me these stories about people that come in and, you know, they'll have a cold, like literally a cold, and they want something for it. You know, they want antibiotics, and they want antibiotics for viruses. And he will say, well, I'm not giving you an antibiotic for that. And, you know, they will get irate. People, you know, and there's just this epidemic of mental health issues with depression. I was just reading a statistic actually from the US actually that in 2017, 25% of children under the age of 17 are now medicated for either depression, ADHD, or anxiety disorders. That's just, and him and I talk about that sometimes, and he tells me I believe it because I see it all the time. You know, people coming in, and when he asks people what they eat, they're offended, or they'll say, what does that have to do with anything? And, you know, so he has this little system that he's worked out where he has some really great books that he's sort of read about different topics. He's really engaged and always reading the latest science and stuff. And so if someone comes in to the emergency room for heartburn or gastro reflux, which happens a lot, crazily enough. And
they go to the ER.
Oh yeah, they go to the ER for that. He'll say, you know, I mean, we're in an ER setting, this emergency room, and it's not really, you know, he's not doing long-term care there, but I have a couple good books that I could recommend that really will help you to sort of, you know, you can talk about this with your family doctor or whatever. And
it's like
he
change
said
your
that
diet.
maybe, yeah,
these books are more, about nutrition or something. Yeah.
Exactly. They're all about nutrition. And people, he said that he would estimate that about 5% of his patients will actually take that piece of paper from him that he's written down the book on.
Wow.
Yeah. So people either just say, and they say straight out, give me a pill, or they get mad at him, or they say, I know I need something right now, or they, you know, but only 5%, he said, will actually take and say, you know, be grateful to have a direction, to be put on a path. Yeah.
That's so sad. And just with the youth, with all the medications, what do people attribute that to? I mean, this is not normal. What's changed is our food environment.
No.
And I'm just trying to figure out what people try to blame this on when it's pretty obvious that a lot of it is a nutritional thing.
I know.
Does your husband know? Does he have any Does he say anything about that or what
I
people
mean, he sees it 100% as nutrition too, but there's also a lack of physical activity. I think there's a lack of place.
Oh, it's a whole lifestyle. Yeah. I guess I shouldn't just say
Yeah.
nutrition. I guess I package it because you and I are on the same page as it's a whole thing. It's not like a way of life, and that it revolves around nutrition. But yes, you're right. Like, sleeping and moving.
Yeah, exactly. But he sees it all the time. I mean, just last week he had a 19-year-old girl that came into the ER at 3 a.m, and she had her sister, her parents, and her brother with her. And she was there because she had gone off to college and she was stressed out about college. She didn't like it. She was having a hard time with her grades. That sort of typical things that happen to kids when you're 19. Shit happens. And you get through those sticky patches. But her parents were demanding that she be put on antidepressants at 3 a.m. in an emergency room.
Oh my God.
Because they were scared that she was going to kill herself. And she didn't want to kill herself. She didn't even have a voice because her parents were talking for her the whole time. But I mean, it's this, I don't know if this comes with sort of this, if we're in this age of ease, that is very dangerous, where we think that things should always be easy, and that when you have these challenges, it's a dysfunction, or when you feel stressed, it's a dysfunction. Even my 16-year-old daughter a couple weeks ago came home and she had a big midterm exam, and she's very studious, and she was kind of getting worked up about it. And she said, I think I have anxiety. And I'm like, why would you even use that word? Like, you're nervous, you're shitting scared, you're whatever, like, why do we have to attach a mental health condition to these normal feelings that everybody experiences? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, society, we got to make some changes here. So to wrap things up, I guess you already talked about a lot of stuff that you can do, getting in your community and finding ways to eat the right food, even if you live in a city, that it's not hard. It's just different. I like that. What else?
Yeah, no, I think that we really have to get back to this community-based agriculture. And we're not going to see that on a macro level at all, because food has become a commodity that's being used to be traded around the world, and it's making people rich, people at the top rich. And I think that we can leave them to that commodity-based agriculture, fine, whatever. But when we're talking about food and nutrient-dense food and food that nourishes the land and nourishes relationships, I think we have to turn back towards our communities. And I think that's the big point, is that, we don't have to feed the world. We have to feed our communities. That's a red herring when they say we have to grow so much to feed the world. No, we don't. We're not even feeding our communities right now. And that's what we need to focus on. So, there's great websites. I know the Weston A. Price Foundation has chapters all over the world, actually, and you can look it up on their website and find a chapter leader that's in your area, and they keep lists of farmers. And it's not just any farmer. They're looking for people that are doing right by the animals and right by the land, and you can go out and meet these people. Or you can find food co-ops in your area. There's another site called Eat Wild, and they have farmers that are doing grass-based, land-based agriculture. You can find CSAs, go to the farmers market even, and ask there if there's people doing CSAs. There's even like organic food delivery boxes that come right to your house. If you really want to get into it, you can get involved in hunting. There's tons of groups that have like learn to hunt groups, and you can get and go harvest your own meat. I mean, we hunt here, awesome. And that's a big, it really is. And it gets you back out on the land. It's economical. There's people, especially, old guys love to teach people how to hunt, so, there's definitely, and it doesn't have to be everything at once. It can just be little bits, and it can just be making those choices. And then next thing you're doing it, and you don't need to know how you're going to get from point A to point Z. You just got to get to B, And then you realize how easy these things are, and you take another step and do another thing, and it just grows on itself. And it's such a feeling of accomplishment and confidence in yourself, and maybe a little bit of pride for doing things differently. And your eyes get opened wider and wider as you see that, it's really not hard, and that it's really been the great con job of our century to make us think that all this stuff is hard and foreign and out of reach, because that's just not true.
I totally agree. One step at a time. And yeah, I've started that path, and you're right. It gets easier. And yeah, making bone broth. I'm like, well, that was easy. And you just keep going down that path. And I love that the community, you start with your community, eventually it'll make it to the world, right? If you start with your community, in 50 years, by the time the world, has this big population explosion, if we're on the right path, then it'll be figured out. But it starts from that community base. So, wow, this has been so awesome. I can't wait to come out there. I want to just move in. I don't know if that's possible. Maybe I could.
I'll put you to work, but you can come.
Yeah. Oh my God, that sounds amazing. That's what people need in this modern society, is just a real day's work, and it's so satisfying. If you every now and then I do have a real day's work, and you just love it. You feel satisfied. You built something. I built a wall. It's like, this is my wall. I built it.
Oh, and it's so true.
I love that. Can't wait. It's going to happen. We're going to get some meat on the down low. Won't tell anyone. And
no, I think we should tell everyone. And I think you should film it. I don't give a shit. I want to do it.
Well, if anyone wants to arrest you, we'll make a huge case of this. Let's do a whole, I mean, I'd love for them to try to do something, and we'll blow it up in their face and get the whole continent of North America on our side.
I'm down. But, I'm ready.
All right. Well, Tara, it's been so great at Slow Down Farmstead. Best account on Instagram.
Oh, wow.
I 100% say that with no hyperbole. So
thanks.
Let's make this happen.
Yeah, that's cool. Thank you so much. It was great talking to you.
You as well. You know the drill. Please share with a friend and leave a review and rating on the Apple Podcast app or wherever you listen. You can still order a It's What Else You Eat, Not the Meat t-shirt or tank top through the Food Lies Indiegogo page. There may be only one episode before the holidays with all my traveling to finish up the film shoots. We'll then take a break, and season 3 will begin in January. I should have some really great guests, so be ready.